Okay, well, welcome everyone to the Never Too Late podcast. Another great episode for you this week. I've got a special guest for you again, a real treat as always, as the great Brad Lee always says. This is Miss Andrea Allen. How's it going,
Hi.
Andrea?
Great. How are you?
Great. Awesome to have you here. Good to see you again. Like always, I like to just start this out and just have you tell the people who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Well, as Andrew said, my name is Andrea Allen. I'm a certified health coach. I came into this industry over 11 years ago. Actually, this last weekend, I celebrated 11 years of health. Some people maybe like cessation of smoking or, being sober. With food, it's a little bit different because food you have to indulge in, you can abstain from those other things. So it's a little bit challenging, but I'm thankful for 11 years of really great health and vitality and being able to keep up with my kids after struggling with an autoimmune disease that left me debilitated for most of my 30s, and sleep deprived and brain fogged up and depressed and all those different things. And so I'm just so blessed to be have learned all the things I've learned, have the tools that have come into my atmosphere and my environment that I've been able to embrace and just continue to grow and to serve others in this capacity, to know that there's the solution, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally as you move forward and progress as human beings.
That's awesome. You mentioned serving others, which I think is probably the most important piece of the puzzle in any business or life mission, right?
Yeah. Yes.
No matter where you get it from, whether it's, from church or just community in general or your parents or whatever, I think at the core of everything, if you look at what everything really is, it's about giving to others, right?
Yes. Yes. And that's actually part of a huge portion of your health and well-being is purpose of serving others in some capacity. It doesn't have to be the same way I do it, but in whatever way that conforms to how you want to show up in the world.
Yeah, definitely. And that plays into it's crazy how this stuff works, right? It's like
Yes.
that's actually something I've been thinking very heavily on these last week or so, since before recording this year, but especially this is right after Thanksgiving when you are talking now. It's something that came up when I was talking to my mom this weekend is like, being able to, have that purpose and what are we actually grateful and thankful for, right? And it's different for everybody, of course, but the thing that I found that I'm most grateful for is that I have the ability to help and serve others.
Yeah.
And that's been a big shift in my life. So that's awesome. And I'm not alone in that. It's good to hear.
Yes. Yes.
So how did you said you've been doing this 11 years, and you had some autoimmune things going on. I guess you probably still do. I'm not sure if those two things really go away.
That they don't, you're always a carrier. You can allow your immune system to drop and some of those things. And I actually just kind of had a small relapse last year. And it was different things, more emotional actually than the nutrition side of it. That was some of it as well. But I'm still pretty tight on that because I know the effects of what that does to me. But it's more my kids are going away. Part of my purpose, I still work with my coach after 11 years because you need accountability. I don't care who you are. You're not a superhero. You need somebody in your life. And one of the things she said to me was, well, you developed this right when your youngest was born. And a pattern in your life is she's graduating this year. And so I have ADHD, a lot of entrepreneurs do. This is not like a pronouncement or like anything new or novel, but like one of those purposes of me using all that energy for the day-to-day task was kind of going away. And so it makes me feel less. And so I'm a person that has to have multiple big purposes going on. Those are my drivers. That's what makes me feel fulfilled. And she just put the finger on it and said, well, a pattern in your life, here we are again. And so, I love my business. I'm continuing in this area, but I'm going to be expanding in the next, 1 to 3 years with somebody else who is a big purpose person. I love surrounding myself with those people. And so That was a huge shift for me, like energy wise, physically wise, brain fog and emotional wise, all those different things. So I wish I wasn't that way, but that's just how I function. And I think a
Right.
lot of people do that. And I don't think we number one recognize it or call it out. And when you do, then you're like, oh, okay, great. That's something I can work on. You know what I mean? Versus like, I got to get more sleep, or I got to eat this way, or I got to get my act together. You know what I mean? Emotionally, you feel like you're a mess. But if you can identify what that core is, I'm just a driven kind of person, and I got to have those drivers going.
Yeah, that self-awareness is huge, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
like
and I
you
mean,
said,
I'm 48. It took me a minute to get here, guys.
right?
If I can
Well,
help
some people
somebody
spend a whole
speed
life
it
and never figure it out.
right,
So
right. If I can speed somebody else up, great. That's awesome.
yeah, and talk about purpose, right? And at the end of the day, I
Yes.
think if we can learn from other people's mistakes and journeys, then we're that much further ahead.
Yes.
And ultimately, if we all pay attention to that kind of thing, then as a society, as a culture, as a human species, we should progress faster and faster to go, right?
Yes.
Which I think overall has happened.
Yes.
So I think humanity's kind of sort of got that figured out. Maybe not necessarily aware of it, but yeah. But yeah, self-awareness. You mentioned that like a little bit ago, like early when you were introducing yourself, you kind of said that you've got ADHD, and that's not a new novel concept for entrepreneurs, and it's definitely not, right?
Mhm.
I've never actually been like outright diagnosed as that, but I sometimes feel like I probably should go see someone about it, right? Because it's so hard to latch on to one thing, right? When we know we can be doing more.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a human thing more than
Yeah.
entrepreneur specifically. But when you are like you and I and so many people like us, and probably most of the listeners listening to this, you want to have a real impact in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that gets into the self-awareness thing, because if you do not know your strengths, your weaknesses, what to play to, what to build on, what to ignore, you can't do anything for anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where everyone falls off, right?
Yeah.
So that it kind of the mind-body connection, right? You said brain fog, and you had emotional triggers that led to health issues, right? You've been at this for a while, 11 years, you said.
Yeah.
How do you get to recognize when you're getting to that point? Is that something that you can like say clinically it's this, and this, or is it just your life experience? Or
so for me, I was laughing because one of my business mentors, I mean, it was like 3 months of I would call it a light depression. You know what I mean? In this last year, where I didn't, you don't care, and it's like hard to like, just keep putting yourself out there. And I mean, that's what we have to do as entrepreneurs, right? But even in that space, I'm like, if I put myself out there, what kind of energy am I putting out? I'm not going to be attracting what I need to attract. And so I got to be careful also in that space as well. But I think, and my business mentor, and she's like, wow, you were really down there for a while. I said, the last time it was 6 years. I feel like I pivoted a lot faster than the last time.
right?
And if I find myself here, maybe it'll be less than a month. You know what I mean? Again, it is becoming aware, and I don't like that feeling because that depressive state, that feeling, it's very selfish, right? And that means I'm falling back into victim mode. And I just did a presentation on the drama triangle, the victim, villain, hero, just right before we got off of this, and we were talking about that. And I have to be careful when I say about depression. I'm speaking on my own terms, because I know some people have chemical imbalances and different things. And maybe I do. I'm not a person to go to the doctor. I'll figure it out myself, which could be hard also. But it's just like, again, for me, it's finding the drivers, the things that I want to put my energy towards, the things that I am in creation mode. And I probably was mourning the loss of that portion of my life. And a lot of people do that, right? As we are stepping into empty nesting. And so just becoming aware of like what's going on in my life currently. Why am I feeling this way? It's okay to feel this way for a minute, but let's not stay here. Like, acknowledge it.
Yes.
But, and I stayed there longer than I wanted to. And, again, my business mentors are like, what can I do? I'm like, nothing. I have to figure this out myself. You can't fix me. Do you know what I mean? It would be great if somebody else can fix me, but taking personal responsibility for those things, finding a solution that works for you, whether it's medically, whether it's yoga, whether it's journaling, whether it's, reading the Bible, whatever your thing is, that helps you become aware, but then also can help you start pivoting out of that. And even with my clients this time of year it's some fun coaching for sure, because there's lots of triggers that are going on with families and different things. And I don't have to fix that, right? Like I can just help someone become aware. And like this year, can we like improve by 5% how we respond to that person? Like that would be growth for this year,
Right.
like that would be growth.
Yeah.
And when you're empowered in that situation, then you choose healthier things and you start feeding things into your mind, like programming your brain. What does that look like? I had a client I was working with, and he was slipping back into that as we're moving into the holidays. And I was like, dude, don't worry about what you're eating right now. And I shouldn't say that, but that's part of my job. But I'm like, what are you feeding your mind? Like, what are you feeding your mind? Let's start there. And, he chose to dig into some scripture and do some devotionals. And when I talked to him this week, I'm like, all right, how many days? You said you were going to do it 5 days a year, 4 out of 5. Great. That's a win. Let's go from there. Like, what do you want to tackle next? But his language, his energy, everything shifted right this week, and it's just helping people have the win, and to be able to pivot faster than they did the last time.
Yeah, and that having a win, that is so important, and it can be a little thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
It can be as simple as I got out of bed and my alarm went off.
Yes, right.
It can be that simple.
It depends on the person. Like, you know what I mean? There's some people that, again, I don't want to focus on the food right now, because if we don't deal with this part of it, we can't deal with the other. You know what I mean? One is the driver of the other. And so then other people are like, oh, it's cold. I need to drink more water. Great. So let's work on, you know what I mean? Whatever it is that they want to focus on, I have them identify things that they would like to identify and improve on to have a win. And it doesn't need to be like perfection. That's, it would be great if you are. And I have people that do that on the daily, and that's great. But not everybody is in that space this time of year.
Yeah, no, that's, and this time of year especially, right? You see it. I've definitely felt it. Oddly enough, this year probably more than I have in recent years. So my dad passed away about 18 months ago, so he wasn't with us last year for holidays either. But for some reason this year, like it just hit me like a truck. Like for whatever reason, I'm not sure really why that happened. I'm not probably going to reflect on it too much because I'm through that now, but it did. And it kind of, everything you're speaking to sounds a lot like emotional intelligence, which this one doesn't come up very often in business stuff, right? I think I probably should more, but that's actually something that I've been exposed to a lot the last probably 10 years or so, because a good friend of mine in a whole different part of my world, he's a physical education professor at a college, and he speaks a lot on emotional intelligence as it applies to sports, but also
for sure
that applies to life too, because sports is life, right?
Yeah.
It's a microcosm of how the whole thing works. So it's just like the synchronicities that keep coming up when I talk to you or any other guest. It's like there's been this thing on my mind, and here you are talking about it, right? It's weird how that works. So
that's what you're ringing right now. It's coming to you, all the things to support you in this journey, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. The manifestation seems to be a thing, right? Whether you do it intentionally or not, what you're putting out does come back. So, and that's a huge lesson in itself, right? Like, I'm sure you talk to your clients about that too. It's like, if you're in victim mode, like you mentioned earlier, everything's miserable because you make it that way,
Yes.
So,
So I hear.
I'm sorry.
No, you go ahead.
So what I was going to ask is, like, when you're talking to your clients, how do you assess what they're actually needing from you, or if they're a good fit, or do you kind of go into it like this is a formula I follow and go from there?
So, I mean, with what I work with, there's a system involved, right? And I start with that base structure. for sure, because, that's what my training is. I believe in intuitive. At this point, after 11 years, there might be some changes that need to be made out of that base structure, and that's fine. But a lot of times, again, I'm a communications major, so I'm listening to their language, right? Like, are they ready? Their language is telling me, without the words telling me, whether they're ready or not. And there are times I say, I really do want to work with you, but I don't think we'll have we won't have a successive win right now because you're not ready. And sometimes people will sit with that, and I don't do it as a selling point for somebody to get mad and come back. But that happens, right? Sometimes they get pissed off and like, she said I couldn't do it. And I mean, I'm that way. So, but that's not my intention. But if that wakes you up, right? Like to help step you up from like a 6 to being ready to make, habitual change in your life to an 8 or 9. Okay, great. But that driver is only going to last for so long, right? Like once you start feeling better, and we use structural tension and coaching, and people will come to me because they can't sleep, they don't have energy, they've got brain fog, they're just chronic pain all the time, and a lot of times nutritionally that's taken care of. Results not typical in a few weeks. Then we're starting to work on the structure of eating and developing those habits. And if you're ADHD or something like that, you're bored, right? Like, but what structure is not sexy. It's not. It's just structure.
Right. Yeah.
Whether you're doing it with me or a different way, I think it was in Atomic Habits. The guy said, "What's the difference between?" He asked a weightlifter, "What's the difference between you and that guy?" And he's like, "I embrace the boring, the dull, the monotonous." And I was like, ooh.
That's real.
I know, for real. And so, a lot of times I'm checking their language, but I kind of ask those questions. I know this isn't like your favorite thing, but here's the thing: this is going to get you to where you told me, and here's what you said you wanted. You know what I mean? Like, go back and revisit those things. And then sometimes we have to go back and revisit their why, like, because it's changed, because some of those things are resolved early on, and that's why people like in the middle of their journey kind of fall off, right? Like I can almost predict it at this point, depending on, again, their language and whether they're going to stick with it or not. And that's okay. If they need a break and they come back and start again, they're like, oh, I get it, I got to work on this.
Oh.
Yeah, it's great. That's awesome. I'm so glad you're not hurting anymore. So let's come at it from a creative approach instead of a desperation approach. But desperation gets us to the first step, but creativity gets us to all the way.
Yeah. It's kind of like, I'll speak like from a business side of things, right? You start a new business, you get really far into it, you're making good progress, but then you get that kind of plateau, right? And every entrepreneur ever has run into that, right? When it happens is different, but everyone's hit it.
Yes.
And you're too far into it to turn away, but you're not seeing anything out of it yet because things just take time. So you're like, right? You're just losing your mind.
Yes.
It's the same with anything in life, right? You just get to that point, and then that's where that being twice as boring, and that that drive to push through. That's what separates the successful from the not successful.
Yes, and also teaches you who you are in the process. Like,
yes,
for sure.
And that's
where you learn. That's where you learn the most.
Yeah. We always learn and grow the most in the hard times, right? Yes. Nothing grows without stress. You have to have some kind of stressor to make growth. You talk about bodybuilding, that's all that is. You're carrying down muscle to make your body build more, repair it, and so on and so forth.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that you brought that up too, because this isn't like a just now kind of thing, but I've been taking my health a lot more seriously this last 6 weeks or so now. And I took last week off from the gym, mostly not on purpose. I did have one kind of lingering thing. I was like, I need to let that heal a little bit, and then holidays and excuses, right? But I got back to it this morning. I went to go do my bench press, and I'm doing my warm-ups, and I'm like, this is really easy. So I went up like 40 pounds from what I was doing before. I'm like, okay, holy crap, it's working, right?
Yeah.
And that's with anything, like I'm sure you see with anything, right?
Yes.
So
yeah.
No, it's amazing when people fully understand that the strongest or the weakest muscle that we have, if you want to put it in that frame, is our mind, right?
Mhm.
If you can put your mind in the right framework and mindset to survive, right?
Yes.
To excel, you will always win. It might take decades, but
Yes.
you'll always win.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's awesome. You mentioned that you're still working with the same mentor that you've been working with this whole time.
Oh, I have this amazing group of people that I'm working with in my organization. I've hired people outside of my organization as well for different areas. But we have so much, and in my company, we have so much free personal growth and emotional intelligence work. Like I feel like we're stealing stuff sometimes. I mean, we had John Maxwell at our last conference. We had Jim Dethmer. If you haven't heard of him, he's super great. We had Jim Quick talk to our group the other night. He did it, and his little kid was in the background,
Yeah.
talking to just all of our company. And so, we have access to really amazing people, and so it's great. It's great.
If you're experiencing burnout, whether you've been losing yourself at work or losing yourself in a relationship, our Unlock Your It Factor program is designed for you. You will learn simple, applicable tools to get reconnected and authentically aligned so you can achieve greater success in life. Check it out.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
John Maxwell, that's amazing, right?
He's awesome. Yes. Yeah.
That's really cool. So mentorship in general is brought up a lot in conversations about business and personal development, right?
Yes.
Surround yourself with the people you want to be, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
How we all know what's important, right? How do you recognize that it's working though? Because you can say that my drive, my ambition, my work, at the end of the day, without you doing the work, it'll get anywhere, right?
Right.
So if you look at it from that perspective, how important is having that accountability, that mentor actually to that process? You can probably speak to that more than a lot of people because you've been with the same group of people for so long.
Yes. Yeah. We have a really high retention rate in our group because we have a real tight core group. And I love that. That says a lot about who we are. But even today in our meeting before I hopped on here, my business mentor was like, all right, what's your commitment for the number of hours that you're gonna, log into connecting with individuals? They're still like always calling for accountability, and you can participate or not participate. It's your business. And nobody's looking over your shoulder, but at the end of the week, like it's great to track how many conversations you had. It's great to track the number of hours you did, and kind of break it down. And as you know, there's seasons of when you're doing that, and then you just like, things are good, I'm just gonna do it. But you don't always do it.
Right. Yeah.
And she was calling some of us out on, and it was good. It was, nothing bad, but like if you're feeling a certain way, you're too inward focused. You need to be outward focused. And, all of us kind of feel like that in my industry. As a health coach, we've got a new dynamic that's come in, which is all the new weight loss drugs. And let me tell you, it has affected our industry, $59 billion a year. It's definitely affected our industry. And there's, it's not the first time that something like that has been implemented. So how do you pivot? How do you adapt? How do you change? How do you handle yourself emotionally during that process? How do you respond? And, that's what we're always working on, not like the things that we can't control, right? Is that, but what can we control? How can we support people that are on medically less drugs? What does that look like? getting open and curious about it. So it's always important to, number one, like what she did today, like how many hours you're gonna log like an attorney, right? Because as entrepreneurs, we can just go about our day and think, oh yeah, I work today. I mean, I've done it because I've had really good seasons. Like what you talked about earlier, I've had really good seasons where like referrals are just flying at me, and I'm like, I don't even have to do anything. And I got 10 new clients this last week. It's awesome. We're not in that period right now. It's back old school to work it like we did when we started. Social media is great, but it's not, you used to put up a post and everybody would come flooding to your doors. We're not there anymore. People are over that. They're done with that, and that's okay, right? So you can quit or you can change. Those are the things. And so I think it's really great because even the people that have really big businesses are like, yeah, we're being affected by this too. You're not alone. So what are we going to do about it? So I think accountability is huge because, nobody's sitting here with us, Andrew, right? Like nobody's here telling us what to do. We want to be our own boss, which means we have to be our own boss.
Yeah, exactly. And you got to be in charge of yourself, right?
Yeah.
And that can be really hard some days.
Yes. I like having fun.
Yeah, you got to have fun for sure. And then, having that defined why and that defined purpose helps a lot, right?
Yes.
You got to be able to wake up in the morning and go, okay, well, I don't want to, but why do I have to?
Yes.
Right. And then that's how you go about your day. Like that's how it works for me. So, and then.
Yeah. And my question is now, who am I going to serve today? Like that's a bigger driver for me than do I want to or do I want to not want to? Like who's going to come into my world today? How am I going to get out to be in the space for people to come into my world so that I can serve them? If they need it, great. If they don't, that's great. I'm happy for them. I'm going to celebrate them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, having that, that sense of purpose again, right? Like I get to, I don't have to do any of this. I get to, which is the best thing ever, right?
Yeah.
You get to help people.
Yeah.
That's something that came up a couple of days ago too, was like, quit thinking about things that you have to do, want to do, whatever else. Like, what do you get to do?
Yes.
Like, well, I get to wake up today. I get to breathe. I get to, all these things.
That reframing changes everything.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Such a massive thing. So yeah, that's, the mentorship thing. That's really awesome that you've had that same group for so long and that retention, and all that. That's amazing. Right. And it's clearly worked out for you as far as you're trying to get personally professional, all these things. And that's kind of what I was trying to get to with that question is like, there's a lot of little clips and catchphrases about like your net worth is your network and blah, blah, right? Well, what does it actually mean in practicality? So having someone that's been in that environment like that for over a decade, that should help kind of clarify that to some people wondering like, is this real?
Yeah.
And I hope it did. It definitely reopened my eyes to it. I believe those things wholeheartedly anyways, but it's good to see this out there too, right?
Yeah.
So that's awesome. When it comes to like the future of what you're doing, right? You mentioned right now is hard with the health coaching thing because of like Ozempic and that kind of stuff, right? Which, like anything, I think we all know that Ozempic's not going to be a long-term solution for anybody. It's already showing that, right? But in the meantime, you've got to be able to go back to basics. Right? Where does that ability to that's the one I'd ask that. The pivoting. How do you know when to pivot? Like,
well, it's pretty obvious when the things that you were doing before weren't working, right? And I mean, I worked with the same company during the pandemic, and we grew 219% in 1 year. Like I said, you throw a post up, right? And everybody, and not everybody decided to become a coach. They might have decided to be a distributor of our program, and all those people are gone now, right? Because it comes to this point where the real work begins, right? If you want to continue, and what I do is work. It's not a fly by night kind of thing. But people, they're like, oh yeah, this will fix my financial problems. It might briefly, but you actually have to labor and do the work. So I think it's really identifying, and you had a good point, like when you hit a plateau, right? Should I continue in the path that I'm doing, like, and just keep hitting this wall? You mentioned that earlier, or should I pivot? So I mean, that's a valid question. I'm putting two of your questions together a little bit there. Sometimes it's just being consistent and showing up and doing different things, but that's hard for a person with ADHD because we always want to try something new, like, oh, that's flashy and let's try that.
Yeah.
But sometimes the flashy thing is doing the boring thing, right? But in this case right now, with a new entity that has come into the industry, right? You have to pivot, right? It's blatant, right? If you just got lazy and you weren't working, and then all of a sudden you got to rebuild your business, you just need to do the work.
Yeah.
But in this instance, a new entity has, created a diversion in the industry, which happens. Like, this is not the first weight loss drug ever, right? We've had 10-10, we've had all these different things, and some of them are around, some of them are not around. And so, you just continue to help people because what they need help most with is emotional stuff, right?
Yeah. And especially in the world you're in, right? Like that's,
Yes.
I think, you're probably, and this is just me guessing, because I'm not you, right? I don't do what you do, but I would guess that more times than not, whatever people's issues are that you're trying to help them with or looking for help from you, they end up being emotional, mental things after that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And you'll see people who are losing weight on it, and some people are not because they still eat. Basically what those drugs do, which is similar to actually what the depression and ADHD drugs. I was just having a conversation with somebody, I'm like, that one's way cheaper if you're going to do it. I'm not a promoter of drugs, by the way. If you can figure it out, great. But if you need that, great. But basically it just bypasses, shuts off that impulse control center in your brain. And somebody I know is on like a depression medication for ADHD, and I'm like, you got to eat, you got to keep eating. He's forgetting to eat. And I was like, it's doing the same thing. It's a lot cheaper, but the side effects of the drugs is, muscle waste, right? Because then you might be eating crap. Hopefully, we're implementing a program where, you're still getting good nutrition to help not lose muscle mass, because that's the bad side effect of this. But, it has helped people. Like, you know what I mean? I know people that it has helped, just like weight loss surgery. It's not my favorite, but I know one of my friends from high school who she did the heart work and the head work.
Right.
And that's totally different. And so are you avoiding doing that by taking the drug, or the surgery or whatever else? What's the intention? What's the motivation behind that? So that's just, everybody's different.
Yeah. More self-awareness, right?
Yes, it is. We're going back to that again.
Yeah. And that's a common theme that keeps coming up in conversations I have with people on this is, be aware of who you are and what your effect in the world around you is, right? I think it was Sebastian Angus that made a comment recently about there's two different pieces of the puzzle to self-awareness. There's knowing who I am, what I want, what I'm trying to accomplish. And then there's knowing what effect those things have on everyone around me, right? Yeah. And that second piece of the puzzle is where most people seem to kind of fall off the whole thing, right? It's like, what am I doing? What effect is what I'm doing have on people around me? Mm-hmm. And then they realize maybe it's not a grand an effect as I thought it was, or it's bigger than I thought it was, or whatever. And it's like, okay, whatever that result is, it's scary, and I want to back away from that, right? Yeah. People tend to quit before it gets real good, right? Or would have got real good.
Yeah.
For that reason. So.
Yeah. Well, I think, when it comes to emotional skills, and I say that means, developing skills around your knee-jerk response, basically. We don't feel like we can develop those. It's easier for us to go to the gym, right, than it is to monitor why we eat the way we do. I mean, I'm that way. I would love to output it all day long. That would be easier for me, right? But or like around your finances. That's another emotional issue. Why do I respond that way? And people are, I used to say, because there's several years I made really good money in this company, and it was like, why am I still in debt? Because I still have those bad habits, right? Like it just applied to a different area of my life. And what did that bring me? That brought me shame. And I thought, okay, and my language was, well, I'm just not good with money. I'm not, and I blame my husband because I was like, well, he's the business minded person, right? Like I'm just out here loving on people and serving them. And I mean, all the excuses above the line, below the line. That's what I talked about just a minute ago. And I was blaming him and, making excuses for myself why I didn't have the skill set. It's just a skill set. You can learn anything. And I think once I hit that, I'm like, okay, great. Like, what if you could just focus on practicing, developing a skill set that does involve emotion? What if we could take the emotion away from it? You know what I mean? And just one at a time, like identify one thing you'd like to work on this month and like, let's develop a muscle around it. And so that's what I love doing, because it takes shame, it takes blame, it takes all the things away from, whatever that habit or that, thing that you're doing, and gives you some empowerment around it, knowing that, hey, I could change this when you don't feel like you could, when you take personal responsibility for it.
Right. Yeah. And there's so much you can unpack with all this, right?
Right.
It's crazy to me. The more I talk to people about anything like life or business, specifically those two things, because I spend a lot of time talking about those things, right?
Yeah.
It all comes back to the same thing. It's like, how aware of yourself and your impact are you actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer for the vast majority of people, unfortunately, is they have no idea. It's not even unaware or at all. They just don't know. They never ask themselves the question, or no one's ever asked them, right? And then that's where having that network and those mentors and all these things can be kind of a little kick and a boost to push you that direction, right?
Yes.
So that's super important to have. That if you look at it I'll look at it from a sobriety aspect, right? Because I'm dealing with that myself too.
Right.
That first step of recognizing that you need to change and you might need help with it, or you do need help with it, is the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
From there, it's so much easier.
Yeah.
Most of the time, there are still hard days, right?
Yes.
But after that,
But just admitting to yourself, do you know what I mean? Like, and because that is taking responsibility. I can't blame anybody else anymore. I have to own this.
Yeah.
And whew, that's hard, right?
Oh yeah. Yes, it was. Like I said, some days it still is, right? Because it's I just did a recording last week talking about exactly that. I had a really, really hard weekend a couple weeks ago about that, right? I was just struggling with it for whatever reason. I'm not really sure why I got to that point. I got an idea, but I was just hating myself because why do I need this so badly, right? But I was able to push through it and find some productive lessons from that to be able to add to my toolkit for the next time it happens, because it will happen again, right?
Well, yeah.
So that's
the best part of life. It gives you lots of opportunities to practice.
Oh yeah, we got roughly 80 or so years of opportunity to figure the stuff out. The sooner the better. But we got.
Now, some of us are just slow learners.
Well, it's good to have people like you in the world that can kind of help push things along a little bit, right?
Yeah.
So, and you mentioned during the pandemic there was a lot of people that came on board to your company. We saw all kinds of crazy stuff happen in the coaching world specifically. I mean, we had coaches to coach coaches who were coaching coaches who learned how to coach. It was insane. Some of them are still out there thinking that they're doing something, right? I was approached by a couple of them like, oh, do you want to be a coach? I'm like, I'm not that person now or maybe ever. And I definitely don't need to learn it from a 19-year-old kid that read on like a blog, That's what drove me nuts about it. I was like, what are you coaching? You don't have any life to coach, but there is so much of that. And we see that so much more because of the internet and social media, right?
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, the last few years has gotten better. People got kind of wise to the BS, right?
Yeah.
but they're still out there. And unfortunately, in your industry specifically, there are a lot of them. There's a lot of snake oil out there, right?
Yes. Well, and of course, I think for like 8 months, I went through LinkedIn just trying to reach out and connect with people, and we'd have groups to see if you were a fit. And so many people had paid thousands of dollars, right, to an organization to have a certificate. And I'm saying this nicely because unfortunately, because I started when I did, we didn't have all that. Like, we learned all the things. Like, I'm old school, I guess you want to say that. And there's so many great organizations out there and you can do that. But I saw so many people put so much money into it, but they don't have the skills to market and sell themselves. I had one lady who said, well, I don't want to do that because I don't want to sell anything. I said, no matter what you do, you have to sell yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you can't do that, you can't have a business. Like, do I like to get out here every day and go, look at me? No, I don't. I don't. It's not my favorite thing. But you know what? I have to get over that to help other people. But I saw so many people pay like thousands and thousands of dollars for a piece of certificate. And, you know, we became friends and we're on social media and they're not even in that world. Like, it was just a flash in the pan. And I was like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
Objects into the extreme, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I want to help you. I have the skills to help you grow a business.
Yeah.
Definitely. I've had good years and bad years and all in between. So I know all the things.
Yeah. And that kind of experience is invaluable. There's no price you can put on that, right?
Right.
Also kind of is one of those things too. It kind of drives me crazy is like, you know, people are like, oh, I'm not going to pay for coaching, this, whatever. It's all a scam. It's like, well, one, vet that first, right? Make sure they're legit. But if they are, and there's nothing suggesting that they're not, there's no amount of money you can put into that coaching, consulting, mentorship that will ever be too much, right?
Yeah.
Unless you're taking food off your table, I guess that's too much, right?
Yeah.
But you know, Tony Robbins is a great example of this. You know, to go to one of his big things is $10,000 to start with.
Right.
And for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. And I can understand where if you're in a position where that, you know, that can be too much logistically. But at the same time, if you take it seriously and you leave from that with something valuable, which you will, that's amazing, right? You're going to get so much more back out of that, right? Especially if you just view money as what it is, a tool. Thing, right?
Well, I think it's funny because the more it hurts, the more you're going to get out of it.
Yeah.
That's what I've learned in all these years. Because I try to help people. I'm very empathic. You know, I'll offer them a discount. I do every once in a while, but I just don't really discount what I do anymore because you want it or you don't. That's where I'm at. I just don't care.
You know, right, exactly. If you want it bad enough, you'll find a way to make it work.
Yes, I've had people who sell things, like have yard sales or sell things online to work with me. And then I have people that live down the street in this really nice golf community who say, oh, I can't afford that, honey. And then I see they bought like a $400 purse the next day. And I'm like, it's just not your priority, which is fine.
Right. So they were honest when they said that. They can't afford it because they didn't want it.
It's not their priority, which is it's fine. It's just, you know, you're not going to make it anyway. So that it's not a loss. I want to work with you when you're ready. So yeah.
Well, that's the only time it's going to work. You know, you can't help someone who doesn't want to help themselves. So and then you know, kind of, I'll just touch on this because it's on my mind now, but like on the sales side of things, right? Like you clearly understand that you're not everyone's your customer, right?
No.
And that's something that we've all dealt with as, you know, business people in this world, right?
Yeah.
People that, I don't want to sell anything. Well, you're already the greatest salesperson in the world because you sell yourself short every day, right?
Yeah.
Which is something that kind of makes the people mad when you say it, but it's honest, it's real because, you know, that worked for me. It might not work for everybody, but that did work for me. Someone told me that a while back. And I'm like, no, you're right. You're a jerk, but you're right.
I don't want to hear that.
No, but I did something about it, right?
Yeah.
I became, I'm not going to say I'm a sales genius, but I became proficient with it.
Right.
You know?
You developed a skill around it.
Yes, and I still am it every day.
Yes. Yes.
So that's, that's another thing that people need to kind of wrap their heads around is that,
Mhm.
no matter what we're doing, we're all salespeople.
Yes.
We have to
Yes.
sell ourselves to ourselves to start the day. We got to sell ourselves to other people. All these things have to happen. So
Yeah.
it's all there. But that's probably a whole other conversation getting into that stuff.
Right. And as I'm training new people, if the faster I can get them over, because when you say, well, I don't want to sell things to people, you're thinking about yourself.
Yes.
That has nothing to do with anybody else. The sooner I can get you to, this is a gift.
Yep.
And we find somebody who's ready to receive that gift. This is going to be really fun for both of you. And people come at it from different perspectives. So, it might take a month for somebody. It might take 2 years for somebody. That's exhausting, but it might just one day click for somebody like, oh, I'm not a diet salesperson. When I came into this, we didn't have all the tools and the resources for all the mental health stuff, right? It was literally just eat the nutrition, and that kind of stuff. And so I came in as a diet person, right? Like I was just I didn't know what I was doing, had no idea, right? Well, if you come in that way, then that's what you start selling, right? Because that's what you know until you know something different.
Right.
And, what I do, as we've discussed, is more about behavioral change. It is not like, pop this pill and you'll lose 20 pounds this week, or whatever it is. It is a work you have to invest yourself into. And so, it's not for everybody at that specific time I'm talking to them. I have a lot of people that come back later. But if we can progress from what we think this is to what that this is a gift, my life was forever changed because my coach said, you got to do this. And I was desperate. Like I wanted my life back. I wanted to be a better mom. I wanted to have more. I wanted to sleep all night long, for God's sake. That's it. Like that was a huge win for me. I went 6 years without sleeping longer than an hour at a time. So when I'm training my new coaches, I'm like, you do not know who is laying in bed at night, praying to God, asking for someone, for a solution for a problem. And that's how you need to come out at it. It's not, I got this little thing over here. If you do that, that's what you're going to get.
Right.
So as soon as we can transition, the better.
Yeah. And if we're, as business people, just business in general, no matter what you're doing, right? If we truly believe in what we're doing, that we're answering a calling and answering that purpose, right?
Yes.
Then at the end of the day, we have an obligation to get that to the world in a proper, reasonable, ethical, moral way.
Yes.
Right?
My job is to communicate. It's their job to decide.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And that's where the most successful, honest, successful salespeople in the world have ever come from, is doing it from that place, right? Zig Ziglar's probably the best example of that, right?
Yes.
Sales is not something you do to somebody, it's something you do for somebody. And if you come at it from that direction, everything will be just fine.
Yes.
That's
right.
Do it. So, well, that's awesome. I really, again, I really appreciate that I'm not alone in the world in what I think on this kind of stuff. It's nice to talk to people that also are in that same boat. Which really at the end of the day is why I do this whole thing, right? Is to be able to talk to people and learn from other people, and hopefully all the way around too, and then if there's only ever one person that hears just this episode of this podcast, and that is the only reach I ever get, but that changed their lives, good enough for me.
Yes. Right. That's right.
Because you never know who you're talking to, like you said. So,
right.
So yeah, no, that's awesome. I like what you're doing. I think, especially in 11 years, obviously it's working for you. Otherwise you wouldn't keep doing it.
Right.
And that also means that it's working for other people. So clearly it works, right? Yeah, I guess kind of getting towards the end of it here. I got a couple of things I always like to ask my guests. First, I actually want to ask you, I'll do it kind of reverse what I usually do. What is something that you're super excited about that's coming up in your life, whether it's business or personal or whatever?
I think for me, it is, I feel like, especially as I'm becoming an empty nester type person, that my energy is getting ready to shift, and I feel like starting, I'm not even gonna say next year, but starting, because I've decided from this point on that I'm gonna show up differently. Do you know what I mean? And that's a choice. And when I say that, showing up, I mean showing up in business, showing up as a friend, showing up as a mom, because I've got experience. I've had growth. Do you know what I mean? I have skills and assets that I can quickly share with other people, what I didn't have when I was 19 and trying to offer somebody something. You know what I mean? Like, it's a whole nother level of what I have, and I know what I have and what I bring to the table when I come to the table. So
Right.
it's a lot more fun.
Okay.
So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. You know, another shift. Things always
Yes.
great. So that's really cool. And then another thing I always like to ask, and this is, we kind of throw some people for a loop a little bit, but what are 3 books that you can name that have been a major impact in where you are and who you are today?
Okay, so this is going to be a weird one for you. So, and I made all my children read this. It's The Midnight Library, and I can't remember the author. Haig, Haig. Okay, and it's a fiction book. But you know, if I can get somebody into personal development without them being in personal development, this is the book right here. Okay, because it talks about a lady who is choosing and thinks that her life has no value, and she's trying to end her life. And what happens to her in this phase, in this dreamlike phase, she gets to see different variations of her life and what happens if she had made different decisions, and her conclusions from that as she chooses to come back into the world and show up differently. It's very impactful. So that's one. I mean, I love Atomic Habits. I've read that one several times.
Great.
I don't think there's, I mean, you know, and that's kind of, I feel like that's kind of generic because, you know, a lot of people have read that. I have so many. I've got like bookshelves in here and there, just different ones. And then probably I like Benjamin Hardy's The Gap in the Gain. It's very simple. I read a lot of books. I did personal development with him in a group for a year and a half, and that was really, really good. But The Gap in the Gain is really great because it's teaching you to identify, again, are you like stressed because, and I use this in my coaching a lot, I should be here, like I'm here, but I should be here. And that means you're looking back to just a certain point and it's causing you stress. But if you look all the way back to where you started and see your progress, you'll be grateful. You know what I mean? You're not where you started. And I have a lot of clients who do that. I had one client that lost 100 pounds and then had double knee replacement surgery. And, you know, she did great. And then, like, it's kind of like what you're talking about with your dad. Like, it came back and hit you, that little wall that came back and hit you. I swear I watch it when people have surgery, when I'm working with them, that are like, yes, I made it. And it sneaks up on you later than you think it's going to. And so, you know, she gained like 20 or 30 pounds back. And I was like, and she's like, I should be here. Oh my gosh, I'm not even to where I was before. That's a robber, right? It's a stealer.
Right.
And so he kind of addresses that a little bit. So we have to keep going back to, because that'll keep you in a thought loop that keeps you stuck. And so that one was really beneficial for me and for my clients as well. So,
awesome. Yeah, I haven't heard of that one or the Midnight Library. I'll definitely have to check those out.
Yeah, it might surprise you. It's not going to be in the whole personal development group, but I've read it. I listened to it. Both of my girls, and I send it to people because if they're, you know, if they just read fiction, it's a reflective book for sure. Kind of like The Alchemist. You know, it's a story, but there's lots of great things in there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's really good lessons in good fiction. Right.
Yes, absolutely.
I've told a lot of people, even an objectively bad book, you can still learn something from.
Yes.
So it just transports it to a different perspective by default.
Yes,
What the whole
for
thing.
sure.
So, and then we all individually take different lessons from those things, anyways, because it's how we perceive it. So,
yeah,
well, that's really cool. Thank you for those. I'll definitely have to check out Atomic Habits I've read, I'll probably read it again, but
Yeah.
the other two I'll definitely check out. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I guess the last thing is, just how do people find you? Where do they look you up?
So you can find me on Facebook, but my name is really generic, Andrea Allen, so that makes it a little bit challenging. So I don't know if you'll pop any links in here. I can do that, but I have links for my free health assessment and some consultation time. I do for free 15-minute consultations after you fill out just an initial assessment for yourself. But I love hearing people. I love connecting and hearing people's stories. And helping people shift from like I want to get away from to what you want to create. That's the fun part of the job for me at this point in my life is moving people to creator mode and becoming the dominant force in their life.
Okay, awesome. Well, yeah, everyone listening, the link that she's talking about, we'll have in the description of the episodes, that kind of thing, so that you can find Andrea easily. And then hopefully, if you're looking for the kind of help that she offers with, the health and wellness and that kind of thing, for sure, get out there and, see if what she offers is a good fit for where you're trying to get to, and she'll help you figure that out too. So that should be it for this week. I think it's been an awesome conversation. Thank you so much, Andrea, for your time. It's been great.
Thank you, Andrew. This was fun.
It was fun. Thank you very much. And that's it for the podcast. So everyone, get out there, keep crushing it. Thanks.